The communication arrived on a Tuesday morning, and it changed everything. Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the command center beneath Geneva, watching the holographic display flicker to life. The alien ambassador appeared before him, its four eyes gleaming with what Morrison recognized as contempt. Ambassador Vex Thor of the Keltharian Empire spoke in perfectly translated English, each word dripping with arrogance. Humans of Earth, the Galactic Council has voted. Your expansion into the outer colonies violates established territorial boundaries. You will withdraw all settlements beyond your moon within 7 planetary rotations. You will submit to Council authority and accept our governance. Failure to comply will result in military action. The hologram faded, leaving Morrison staring at empty air. Around him, dozens of officers sat frozen at their stations. The silence stretched for 3 long seconds before chaos erupted. Voices overlapped, shouting questions and suggestions. Morrison raised his hand and the room fell quiet. "Someone get me President Brooks," he said calmly. "And find Lisa Grant. Tell her to get down here immediately." Lieutenant Commander Lisa Grant was in her apartment when the call came. She'd been enjoying her first day off in 3 weeks, actually wearing civilian clothes for once. The urgent summons made her heart sink. She threw on her uniform and caught the next transport to headquarters. By the time she arrived, the Situation Room was packed with politicians and military brass. President Helen Brooks stood at the center, her face pale but composed. She was reading from a tablet, her lips pressed into a thin line. 7 days, Brooks said, looking up at Morrison. "They're giving us 7 days to abandon colonies we've spent 50 years building. Colonies where 3 million people live." Morrison nodded grimly. "It's not really an ultimatum, Madame President. Our intelligence shows Keltharian fleet movements that started 2 weeks ago. They're already positioning for an invasion. This declaration is just theater." "How many ships?" Brooks asked. 47 warships last count. "They'll be at our doorstep in 6 days. Grant slipped into the room and took her position beside Morrison. He glanced at her and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Not fear exactly, more like terrible certainty. One of the senators stood up, his voice shaking. "We need to negotiate. Surely we can reach some kind of compromise." "With respect, Senator, there's nothing to negotiate," Morrison replied. "The Keltharians have been watching us for decades. They know our fleet strength, our weapon systems, our defensive capabilities. They think we're easy prey. This is a conquest, not a diplomatic incident." "Then what do you propose?" Brooks asked quietly. "Our fleet can't stand against 47 Keltharian warships. Every projection says we'd last maybe 3 hours in open combat." Morrison straightened his shoulders. "Madam President, I need to brief you on a classified program. Project Reaper. Most of this room doesn't have clearance, so I'll need to ask them to leave." Brooks studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. "Everyone except Admiral Morrison, Commander Grant, and Secretary of Defense Martinez, please exit." The room emptied slowly, politicians grumbling about being excluded from vital decisions. When only 4 people remained, Brooks locked the doors and activated the security fields that would prevent any listening devices from functioning. "All right, Jake. What's Project Reaper?" Morrison pulled up a new set of files on the holographic display. 50 years ago, after first contact, a small group of military analysts realized something disturbing. Every alien species we encountered had the same basic approach to warfare. Limited engagements, strict rules of combat, ceremonial exchanges of fire that usually ended with one side surrendering before significant casualties occurred. "That sounds civilized," Martinez said cautiously. "It is civilized," Morrison agreed, "but it's not human. Our analysts studied the Keltharians, the Vraxians, the Centauri Collective. All of them evolved on worlds with few natural predators. Their histories show some warfare, but nothing like ours. They never developed the concept of total war. They never faced extinction and had to fight with everything they had." Grant was beginning to understand where this was going. "You built something they wouldn't expect." Morrison nodded. "We built a warship using principles they abandoned thousands of years ago. Weapons they consider barbaric. Tactics they think are insane. We built it in secret, underground, funded through black budget programs that not even Congress knew about." Brooks leaned forward. "Show me." The hologram changed, displaying a massive ship unlike anything in Earth's official fleet. It was brutal and angular where alien ships were smooth. It bristled with weapons ports and armor plating. The design looked almost primitive, but Grant could see the sophistication hidden in its systems. The EDS Valkyrie, Morrison said quietly. She's been operational for 8 months. We've been waiting, hoping we'd never need to use her. Why? Brooks asked. Why hide this from us? Because of what she represents, Madame President. The Valkyrie is designed to fight in ways that will horrify every species in the Galactic Council. She uses kinetic weapons that can punch through energy shields like they're not there. She carries nuclear weapons and antimatter warheads that most species banned millennia ago. Her combat AI processes battlefield data faster than any organic mind. In short, she's everything humanity learned from centuries of trying to destroy itself. The room fell silent. Martinez broke it, his voice hoarse. Does she work? Simulations say yes, but we've never tested her against a real enemy. Brooks walked to the window, staring out at the city lights. If this goes public, if the galaxy learns we've been building weapons of mass destruction in secret, they'll be terrified of us, Morrison finished. Yes, Madam President, but they'll also think twice before threatening Earth again. Brooks turned back to face them. Who commands this ship? Captain Ryan Mitchell, former Special Forces, graduated top of his class from the Naval Academy, and spent the last 3 years training specifically for the Valkyrie. He's the best combat officer we have. Has he been briefed? He knows this day might come. He's been ready. Brooks closed her eyes for a moment, and Grant could see the weight of the decision crushing down on her shoulders. This wasn't just about one battle. This was about revealing to the galaxy that humanity was far more dangerous than anyone suspected. It was about abandoning any pretense of being a peaceful species. Do it, Brooks said finally. Activate Project Reaper. Get the Valkyrie ready to launch. But Jake, I want Mitchell to understand something. This isn't about revenge or showing off. We defend ourselves, but we don't become monsters in the process. Clear? Crystal clear, Madame President. Commander Grant, Brooks said, turning to her. You'll accompany Admiral Morrison to the Valkyrie's facility. I want someone I trust seeing this thing with their own eyes. Grant snapped to attention. Yes, ma'am. 2 hours later, Grant found herself in a military transport heading north. They flew over increasingly desolate terrain until they reached the Arctic Circle. The transport descended toward what looked like an abandoned research station, but as they got closer, Grant could see it was anything but abandoned. They landed on a platform that immediately began descending into the ice. Down and down they went, past layers of rock and frozen earth until they entered a massive cavern carved from the bedrock itself. And there, sitting in a hangar large enough to hold 3 city blocks, was the Valkyrie. Grant had seen warships before, but nothing like this. The Valkyrie was huge, easily twice the size of Earth's largest cruiser. Her hull was dark gray, covered in overlapping plates of reactive armor. Weapon ports dotted her surface like the eyes of some deep-sea predator. She looked hungry. She looked deadly. Beautiful, isn't she? Morrison said softly beside her. She's terrifying, Grant replied honestly. That's the idea. They walked across the hangar floor toward the ship. Crew members were already scrambling over her hull, running final checks and loading supplies. Grant noticed that most of them looked young, barely out of their 20s. They volunteered, Morrison said, reading her expression. Every single person on this crew knows what the Valkyrie represents. They know what they might have to do. A man in a captain's uniform approached them. He was tall and lean, with steady gray eyes and a calm expression. This had to be Mitchell, Admiral. Commander, he said, saluting crisply. Captain Mitchell, Morrison replied. Status? We can launch in 12 hours. Crew is at 98% readiness. Weapon systems are all green. She's ready for war, sir. Morrison handed him a data chip. Your orders, Captain. Read them carefully. President Brooks wants minimal casualties if possible, but your primary objective is to protect Earth, whatever that takes. Mitchell took the chip and met Morrison's gaze. Understood, sir. Will we be operating alone? For now, yes. If things go badly, the main fleet will support you, but they're not equipped for the kind of fight you'll be in. This is your show, Captain. Then we'd better make it count. Grant watched Mitchell walk toward his ship, his stride confident but not arrogant. She wondered what it felt like to command so much destructive power, to know that your decisions might start or prevent a war that could consume millions of lives. Morrison placed a hand on her shoulder. Commander, you'll be... Lisa Grant spent the next 3 days learning everything she could about the Valkyrie. She studied the technical specifications, reviewed the training simulations, and interviewed key crew members. Each conversation left her more amazed and more disturbed by what humanity had created. On the fourth day, Captain Mitchell invited her aboard for a complete tour. She stood on the bridge surrounded by stations that looked both familiar and alien. Everything was designed for efficiency, not comfort. The chairs were reinforced to handle high acceleration. The displays were redundant, with backup systems for the backup systems. Most species design their ships to minimize crew discomfort, Mitchell explained as they walked through the corridors. They avoid high-gravity maneuvers because their bodies can't handle the stress. The Valkyrie is different. We can pull acceleration that would kill a Keltharian crew. They entered the weapons bay and Grant stopped in her tracks. Rows of missiles lined the walls, each one marked with warning symbols in multiple languages. Beyond them, she could see the massive railgun assemblies, their barrels extending deep into the ship's structure. These are kinetic kill weapons, Mitchell said, gesturing to the railguns. We accelerate a solid projectile to incredible speeds and let physics do the rest. Most species abandoned this technology 10,000 years ago. They considered it too destructive, too crude. Why did they stop using them? Grant asked. Mitchell smiled grimly. Because when you fire a chunk of metal at near light speed, you can't really control what it destroys. It punches through shields, through hulls, through planets if you're not careful. Energy weapons are safer, more precise. They can be calibrated for disabling shots. But we kept developing kinetic weapons. We kept developing everything, Mitchell corrected. Because in human history, when you're fighting for survival, you don't worry about being precise or civilized. You worry about winning. They moved deeper into the ship, passing crew quarters that were cramped and utilitarian. Grant noticed that the crew members they passed all had the same look in their eyes. Focus, determination. And underneath, a threat of fear that they were trying hard to hide. In the engineering section, they met Chief Engineer Carmen Rodriguez. She was a compact woman with grease-stained hands and an intense expression. She clearly loved this ship the way some people loved their children. Commander Grant, Rodriguez said, shaking her hand firmly. Welcome to my engine room. You want to know what makes the Valkyrie special? Please, Grant replied. Rodriguez led them to a massive chamber filled with humming machinery. Most warships use fusion reactors. Clean, efficient, relatively safe. The Valkyrie has 8 reactors, each one designed to run at 120% capacity for short periods. We can push them even higher in emergencies, though that risks meltdown. Why would you design them to be dangerous? Grant asked. Because in combat you need power immediately. You need to accelerate hard, fire weapons continuously, run defense systems and sensors all at maximum. Most ships have to choose what systems to prioritize. We don't. We just burn hotter and faster than anyone else. And if the reactors fail, Rodriguez shrugged, then we die. But we die fighting, which is better than dying because we ran out of power at the wrong moment. Grant was beginning to understand the philosophy behind the Valkyrie. Every design choice favored combat effectiveness over crew survival. It was a ship built by people who understood that sometimes winning meant accepting terrible costs. Later, Mitchell took her to meet Dr. Nathan Price, the lead scientist on the Valkyrie project. They found him in a small office surrounded by holographic displays showing weapon simulations. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes and gray streaking his hair despite being only in his 40s. Commander Grant, he said quietly, I suppose you want to know about the doomsday weapons. Doomsday weapons? Grant repeated, her stomach sinking. Price pulled up a new display. The Valkyrie carries 23 antimatter warheads. Each one has a yield equivalent to about 50 megatons of TNT. For reference, that's about 3,000 times more powerful than the atomic bombs we dropped on Japan in World War II. Grant felt the blood drain from her face. Why? Why would we build something so destructive? Because we might need them, Price said simply. The Keltharians have ships that can destroy cities from orbit. The Varaxians have weapons that can crack continents. If Earth faces existential threat, we need the capability to respond in kind. But using these would kill millions. Yes, Price agreed, his voice heavy. That's why I pray every night that Captain Mitchell never has to give that order. But the weapons exist because sometimes the threat of overwhelming retaliation is the only thing that prevents war. Grant thought about this as Mitchell led her back to the bridge. The Valkyrie wasn't just a warship. It was a statement, a promise of such devastating consequences that enemies would think twice before attacking Earth. You look troubled, Mitchell observed. I'm wondering if we're becoming the monsters we're trying to defend against, Grant admitted. Mitchell was quiet for a moment. I think about that every day. But here's what I've learned from studying history. Every peaceful civilization exists because someone, somewhere, is willing to do violence on their behalf. The Galactic Council maintains peace through their fleets. The Keltharians expanded their empire through conquest. Peace isn't natural. It's enforced. So we enforce it with bigger guns. We enforce it by making sure everyone knows the price of attacking us is too high to pay. That evening, Grant attended a briefing where Mitchell explained the tactical situation to his senior officers. The Keltharian fleet would arrive in 2 days. Earth's conventional forces would be positioned throughout the solar system, but everyone understood they were outmatched. Our job is simple, Mitchell said, his voice carrying authority. We make the Keltharians regret coming here. We hit them hard enough that they retreat. If they won't retreat, we hit them harder. A young officer raised his hand. Navigation Officer Kyle Stevens, barely 25 years old. Sir, what if they surrender? What's our protocol? We accept their surrender and let them leave, Mitchell replied. We're not executing prisoners, Stevens. We're defending our home. But, sir, the Keltharians don't really take prisoners in their wars. They see surrender as deeply shameful. What if they fight to the death? Mitchell's expression hardened. Then we accommodate them. But we give them every chance to choose differently. Clear? Yes, sir. The briefing continued, covering everything from communication protocols to emergency procedures. Grant watched Mitchell handle his crew with a mixture of firmness and care. He pushed them hard, but he also made sure they understood the rules of engagement. After the briefing, Grant found Stevens in the mess hall, staring at his food without eating. She sat down across from him. First combat mission? She asked gently. He nodded. I've trained for years, but this is different. This is real. People are going to die because of decisions I help make. That's the burden of command, Grant said. But remember, we didn't choose this fight. The Keltharians did. Everything that happens is because they threatened Earth. Does that make it easier? No, Grant admitted. It just makes it necessary. Stevens looked up at her. Commander, can I ask you something? Do you think we're doing the right thing? Building weapons like this, preparing to fight this way? Grant considered the question carefully. I think we're doing what we have to do to survive. Whether that's right or wrong, history will decide. But I'd rather have these weapons and never use them than need them and not have them. The next day, Admiral Morrison arrived for a final inspection. He walked through the ship with Mitchell and Grant, checking every system personally. When they finished, he gathered the crew in the main hangar. I'm not good at speeches, Morrison began, his voice echoing in the vast space. So I'll make this simple. You all volunteered for this mission knowing what it might mean. Some of you will be scared when the fighting starts. That's normal. Fear keeps you alert. But don't let it paralyze you. He paused, looking at the young faces staring back at him. The Keltharians think we're weak. They think because we haven't been conquering other species, we must be peaceful. They don't understand that we're peaceful by choice, not by necessity. You're about to teach them that difference. We've hidden what humanity is capable of for 50 years. We've let the galaxy think we're harmless. But our ancestors didn't claw their way to the top of Earth's food chain by being harmless. They survived ice ages, plagues, wars, disasters that would have ended other species. That's what flows in your veins. That's what the Keltharians are about to face. Morrison's voice grew stronger. So when they come, when they think they're going to conquer Earth, you show them what happens when you threaten humanity's home. You show them what we're capable of when we stop being nice and start being necessary. The crew erupted in cheers, their fear transformed into determination. Grant felt it too, a fierce pride in her species and what they could accomplish when pushed to the edge. That night, the Valkyrie launched from her hidden hangar. Grant watched from the control center as the massive ship rose through the ice, using stealth systems that made her nearly invisible to sensors. Mitchell positioned her behind the moon, waiting in the lunar shadow like a... The Keltharian fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system, exactly when their ultimatum expired. 47 warships materialized in a perfect formation, their hulls gleaming in the distant sunlight. To Fleet Commander Zaltesh, it looked like the beginning of a glorious victory. Begin scanning for human defensive positions, Zaltesh ordered from his command throne. His 4 eyes swept across the display screens showing empty space. Where are their ships? His tactical officer, a younger Keltharian named Vorkon, checked his instruments. Commander, we're detecting only civilian traffic. Cargo vessels, passenger ships, mining operations, all are fleeing toward Earth. What about their military fleet? Nothing on sensors, Commander. The orbital stations appear to be evacuating as well. Zaltesh felt a surge of satisfaction. The humans were running even before the first shot was fired. This would be easier than expected. Beside him, Ambassador Vexthor, who had insisted on accompanying the fleet, clicked his mandibles in approval. Excellent, Vexthor said. Broadcast the surrender terms. Tell them they have 1 hour to transmit their acceptance, or we begin orbital strikes on their military installations. The message was sent, transmitted on all frequencies toward the blue planet hanging in the distance. Zaltesh settled back to wait, already composing the report he would send to the Keltharian Council about his bloodless victory. Behind the moon, hidden in the radar shadow, the Valkyrie waited. Captain Ryan Mitchell stood on the bridge, watching the Keltharian fleet on his displays. His crew sat at their stations, silent and focused. The time for preparation was over. Now came the test. Athena, analysis of the enemy formation, Mitchell said quietly. The ship's artificial intelligence responded immediately, her voice calm and neutral. Keltharian standard defensive formation, optimized for dealing with energy weapon attacks. Shield overlap provides mutual protection. However, formation assumes enemy will engage at medium range with conventional tactics. Weaknesses? Multiple. Formation is too tight for kinetic weapons. Ships lack point defense for solid projectiles. Shield harmonics are predictable and can be exploited. Mitchell nodded. Everything they'd predicted was proving true. The Keltharians were preparing for the kind of battle they understood. The kind of civilized engagement where ships fired at each other until one side gracefully withdrew. They had no idea what was coming. On Earth, Lisa Grant watched the same tactical displays from the command center. Her console showed both the Keltharian fleet and the Valkyrie's position. Admiral Morrison stood beside her, his face carved from stone. The Keltharians are hailing Earth, a communications officer announced. They're demanding surrender. Ignore it, Morrison ordered. Commander Grant, tell Mitchell he's cleared to begin. Grant opened the secure channel to the Valkyrie. Captain Mitchell, you are authorized to engage. Good hunting. Acknowledged. Mitchell's voice came back steady and calm. Beginning approach now. The Valkyrie emerged from behind the moon like a shark rising from dark water. Her stealth system shut down, and suddenly she appeared on every Keltharian sensor in the system. Alarm klaxons wailed aboard the alien ships. Commander, unidentified vessel decloaking near lunar orbit, Vorkon shouted. Single ship, large mass, unknown configuration. Zaltesh studied the strange vessel now visible on his screens. It looked wrong somehow. Too angular, too aggressive. Most warships were elegant and smooth. This thing looked like it was built from anger and sharp edges. One ship? Vexthor said incredulously. They send one ship against our entire fleet? Hail them, Zaltesh ordered. Let's hear what they have to say. On the Valkyrie's bridge, Mitchell straightened his uniform and nodded to the communications officer. Open channel. His face appeared on screens throughout the Keltharian fleet. He looked directly into the camera, his expression neutral but his eyes cold. Keltharian fleet, this is Captain Ryan Mitchell of the Earth defense ship Valkyrie. You have entered our home system with hostile intent. You have threatened our world and our people. You have 30 minutes to begin your withdrawal trajectory. This is your only warning. For a moment there was silence. Then Vexthor began to laugh. It was a clicking, chittering sound that the translator rendered as genuine amusement. Captain Mitchell, Vexthor said, still laughing. You cannot be serious. One ship against 47? This is either bravery bordering on insanity or a very poor attempt at humor. Mitchell's expression didn't change. I'm completely serious. 29 minutes, Zaltesh had heard enough. Human captain, your posturing is noted. However, you will stand down and surrender your vessel. We have no wish to destroy you, but we will if necessary. Commander Zaltesh, Mitchell replied, I understand you're following standard Keltharian military doctrine. Ritual combat, measured responses, opportunities for graceful surrender. That's not how humans fight. We don't do ritual combat. When we fight to win, using whatever means necessary. Last chance. 28 minutes. Enough of this, Zaltesh snapped. Vorkon, dispatch cruisers 7, 12, and 18. Disable that ship and capture its crew. We'll teach these humans respect. 3 Keltharian light cruisers broke formation and began accelerating toward the Valkyrie. They were confident, moving at standard combat speed. their shields already configured to deflect the energy weapons they expected to face. Mitchell watched them come. Commander Rodriguez, status on Railgun 1? Charged and ready, Captain. Carmen Rodriguez's voice came through the intercom. Target lock is solid. Fire when ready. The Valkyrie's first railgun fired with a sound like thunder in a metal box. Inside the ship, the crew felt the entire structure shudder from the recoil. Outside, a 2-ton cylinder of tungsten carbide launched from the ship's bow, accelerating to a significant fraction of light speed. The round crossed the distance to the lead Keltharian cruiser in seconds. The ship's shields, designed to deflect energy, did nothing against solid matter moving that fast. The round punched through the shield, through the hull, through every compartment and corridor in its path, and out the other side. For a brief moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then atmosphere began venting from hundreds of breaches along the projectile's path. The cruiser's lights flickered and died. It tumbled, silent and dark, its crew dead or dying from explosive decompression. The other 2 cruisers stopped their advance immediately. Aboard Zaltesh's flagship, chaos erupted. What happened? The commander roared. What kind of weapon was that? Vorkon was frantically checking his instruments. Commander, it appears to be a kinetic projectile weapon. Solid matter accelerated to extreme velocities. Our shields weren't designed for that kind of attack. Kinetic weapons? Vexthor said, his voice shaking. But those were banned 8,000 years ago. They're unnecessarily cruel, impossible to calibrate for non-lethal strikes. Zaltesh felt cold fear creeping up his spine. He opened a channel to the Valkyrie. Captain Mitchell, you've used a prohibited weapon. This is a violation of the conventions of war. Mitchell's face appeared on screen again, and this time Zaltesh saw something in those human eyes that terrified him. Not anger or hatred, just cold practical assessment. Commander, we didn't sign your conventions. We didn't agree to your rules. You came to our system with weapons ready to destroy our cities. You don't get to complain when we defend ourselves effectively. Mitchell glanced at something off-screen. You now have 26 minutes to begin withdrawal. Zaltesh looked at the drifting hulk of his cruiser, at the shocked faces of his bridge crew, at Vexthor who had pushed so hard for this invasion. He thought about withdrawing, about accepting this humiliation. But 46 ships still remained. Surely they could overwhelm one vessel, no matter how unusual its weapons. All ships, he announced. Battle formation Epsilon. Concentrate fire on the human vessel. Overwhelming firepower will penetrate its defenses. In the command center on Earth, Grant watched the Keltharian fleet reorganize. Admiral, they're not backing down. 46 ships are moving to engage. Morrison's jaw clenched. Tell Mitchell to do whatever he has to do. Mitchell received the authorization and looked around his bridge. His crew stared back at him, waiting for orders. These young men and women who had volunteered to operate a ship full of weapons that most species considered barbaric. This is it, Mitchell said quietly. They've made their choice. Now we show them what that choice means. All hands to battle stations. Engage at will. Navigation Officer Kyle Stevens felt his hands shaking as he gripped his controls. This was nothing like the simulations. A cruiser full of living beings had just died in seconds, and now they were about to fight an entire fleet. Stevens, Mitchell said, his voice cutting through the fear. I need you focused. Can you do your job? Stevens took a deep breath and nodded. Yes, sir. Good, because our lives depend on it. The Keltharian fleet opened fire. Energy beams lanced through space, converging on the Valkyrie's position. Mitchell had already anticipated this. Execute evasion pattern Delta, he ordered. Full burn. The Valkyrie's engines roared to life, pushing acceleration that would have crushed a Keltharian crew. The human crew, strapped into reinforced seats and trained for high-gravity maneuvers, gritted their teeth and endured. The ship dodged and weaved through the incoming fire, moving. The new arrivals emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. 12 massive vessels, each one larger than any ship in Zaltesh's fleet. Keltharian dreadnoughts, the pride of the Empire's military. Ships that had never been defeated in battle. Admiral Drevkarn commanded the dreadnought fleet from his flagship, the pride of Kelthara. He surveyed the battlefield with his 4 eyes, taking in the destroyed and disabled ships, the debris fields, the single human vessel that had somehow caused this devastation. Open a channel to Fleet Commander Zaltesh, Drevkarn ordered. When Zaltesh's face appeared on screen, The Admiral saw the shame and fear written clearly in his subordinate's expression. "Admiral," Zaltesh began, "the humans have weapons we didn't anticipate. They fight without honor, without restraint." "I can see what they've done," Drevkarn interrupted coldly. "Return to Keltharian space with what remains of your fleet. I will handle this situation." Zaltesh didn't argue. He gave the orders, and his surviving ships began limping toward the system's edge, leaving the dreadnoughts to face the human vessel alone. Aboard the Valkyrie, Captain Mitchell watched the new arrivals with grim recognition. "Athena, identify those vessels." "Keltharian Dreadnought class," the AI responded. Each ship mounts weapons equivalent to 10 standard cruisers. Heavy armor, redundant systems, enhanced shields. These are capital ships designed to fight other capital ships. Mitchell felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. His ship was damaged from the first engagement. They'd expended 30% of their railgun ammunition. The crew was exhausted, and now they faced an enemy that was fresh and far more powerful than anything they'd fought so far. "Captain," Carmen Rodriguez reported from engineering, "the reactors are running hot. We've got minor damage to 3 of them. I can keep us fighting, but we're not at full capacity." "Understood," Mitchell replied. He opened a channel to Admiral Morrison on Earth. "Sir, we have a situation." Morrison's face appeared on screen, and Mitchell saw the same calculation he was making reflected in the Admiral's eyes. "Ryan, you've done more than anyone could have asked. Fall back to Earth orbit. We'll evacuate the planet if necessary. Sir, if we run now, they'll know they can beat us with enough force. They'll come back stronger next time. But if we make a stand here, if we show them that even their best can't conquer us, we buy more than just time. We buy respect. We buy fear." Morrison was silent for a long moment. "What are you proposing?" "Protocol Omega, sir. Full authorization." The channel went quiet. Protocol Omega was the last resort, the option they'd hoped never to use. Morrison's face aged 10 years in 10 seconds. Finally he nodded. "Authorization granted. God forgive us all." Mitchell closed the channel and turned to his crew. "Listen up. I'm about to ask you to do something that will change how the galaxy sees humanity forever. We're going to use weapons that most species banned millennia ago. Weapons of mass destruction. If any of you want to take the escape pods now, I'll understand." Nobody moved. Lisa Grant, who had transferred to the Valkyrie to coordinate with Mitchell directly, spoke for everyone. "We're with you, Captain. Whatever it takes to protect Earth." Kyle Stevens, his earlier fear replaced by a kind of calm acceptance, nodded. "Let's show them what humans do when you threaten our home." Mitchell felt a surge of pride in his crew. "All right then. Stations, everyone. This is going to get rough." Admiral Drevkarn broadcast on all frequencies. "Human vessel, this is Admiral Drevkarn of the Keltharian Imperial Fleet. I've seen what you did to Commander Zaltesh's forces. Impressive for a primitive species. However, you now face the true military might of our empire. Stand down immediately or we will destroy your ship and proceed to orbital bombardment of your planet." Mitchell's response was calm, but carried an edge of steel. "Admiral Drevkarn, I'm going to tell you something important. Your species evolved on a peaceful world. Your wars are ceremonial, limited, governed by rules that prevent total destruction. Humanity evolved differently. We fought wars where entire cities were leveled, where weapons were used that could end all life on our planet. We know what total war means because we've lived it. Primitive barbarism," Drevkarn replied dismissively. "Maybe," Mitchell agreed, "but it taught us things you never learned. How to fight when there's no retreat. How to use weapons so terrible that just possessing them keeps enemies at bay. I'm authorized to use those weapons now, Admiral. You have 5 minutes to join the withdrawal, or I'll demonstrate what mutually assured destruction really means." Drevkarn laughed, a sound the translator rendered as contemptuous amusement. "You're bluffing. No species would actually use such weapons." "You're wrong," Mitchell said quietly. "Humanity used nuclear weapons on itself twice in war. We know exactly what they do and we're willing to do it again to protect Earth. Final warning, Admiral. 4 minutes." Drevkarn ended the transmission and turned to his tactical officer. "He's lying. No species is that insane. All ships advance. Target the human vessel. Fire at will." The 12 dreadnoughts began moving forward, their massive weapons charging. On the Valkyrie's bridge, alarms wailed as targeting sensors lit up the ship from multiple directions. "They're not backing down," Grant reported. "Multiple target locks. They're preparing to fire everything at once." Mitchell took a deep breath. "All right then." Carmen pushed the reactors to maximum. I don't care about safety margins anymore. Stevens, get us into the middle of their formation. As close as possible. Into their formation, sir? Stevens asked, his voice cracking slightly. They're expecting us to run. We're going to do the opposite. Execute. The Valkyrie accelerated toward the advancing dreadnoughts, moving faster than any ship her size should be able to move. The Keltharians, surprised by the suicidal charge, hesitated for crucial seconds. Launch all antimatter warheads, Mitchell ordered. Athena, coordinate detonation pattern Omega-7. From the Valkyrie's missile bays, 23 antimatter warheads launched. They spread out in a calculated pattern, surrounding the Keltharian formation. The dreadnoughts began firing their point defense systems, trying to intercept the missiles, but they were designed to stop conventional warheads, not weapons moving this fast with this much shielding. Detonation in 3, Athena announced calmly. 2, 1, detonation. 23 small suns bloomed in space. When matter and antimatter meet, they destroy each other completely, converting all their mass directly into energy. The explosions were visible from Earth, bright enough to be seen in daylight. The electromagnetic pulses and radiation waves washed over the Keltharian fleet like a tsunami. Shields overloaded instantly. Sensors went blind. Electronic systems fried. The dreadnoughts, so powerful and sophisticated, became helpless hulks tumbling through space. Now, Mitchell shouted over the alarms. All railguns fire at will. Target propulsion and weapon systems. The Valkyrie emerged from behind the expanding spheres of destruction, her weapons firing continuously. Tungsten rounds slammed into the helpless dreadnoughts, each shot carefully aimed to disable rather than destroy. Engines exploded. Weapon ports went dark. Communication arrays shattered. In less than a minute, the entire dreadnought fleet was crippled. Aboard the Pride of Kelthara, emergency lighting cast everything in red shadows. Drevkarn pulled himself up from where the blast wave had thrown him. His bridge was a chaos of sparks and smoke. Damage report, he croaked. Propulsion offline, his tactical officer reported, voice shaking. Weapons offline. Shields offline. Life support running on emergency power. Sir, all 12 ships report similar status. We're defenseless. Drevkarn stared at the view screen where the human ship hung in space like a vengeful ghost. They could destroy us right now, he realized. They could kill us all and we couldn't stop them. Mitchell's voice came through on emergency channels. Admiral Drevkarn, this is what you face when you threaten Earth. We didn't destroy you, though we could have. We wanted you to understand. War with humanity isn't ritual combat or political maneuvering. It's survival at any cost, using any means necessary. You actually used those weapons, Drevkarn whispered. We did, and we'll use them again if we have to. But we're giving you a choice. Go home. Tell your empire what you found here. Tell them that Earth will defend itself with every weapon we can imagine. And humans can imagine horrors that you spent millennia trying to forget. Drevkarn looked around his ruined bridge. Dozens of ships destroyed or disabled. Thousands of Keltharian lives lost. And all because they'd underestimated these humans. These violent primitives who hadn't forgotten how to fight total war. We withdraw, Drevkarn said quietly. We surrender. On the Valkyrie's bridge, the crew erupted in exhausted cheers. They'd done it. Against impossible odds, they'd won. But Mitchell didn't feel triumphant. He felt hollow, sick at what they'd been forced to do. Captain, Carmen's voice came through, urgent and strained. We've got major problems. The antimatter launches overloaded half our systems. Reactors 3 and 6 are in emergency shutdown. Life support is failing in sections 4 through 7. Hull breaches on decks 2 and 5. Sir, the ship is dying around us. Mitchell looked at the tactical display showing the crippled Keltharian fleet, then at his own ship's status screens glowing with red warning lights. They'd won the battle, but the Valkyrie had... 6 months had passed since the battle. The galaxy had changed, and so had Earth's place in it. Captain Ryan Mitchell stood in his cabin aboard the repaired Valkyrie, looking at reports from across known space. Every alien species was talking about humanity now. Some with fear, others with respect, many with both. The Keltharian Empire had withdrawn to its core territories, licking its wounds and reassessing its entire military doctrine. But Mitchell felt no triumph. The nightmares came every night. He saw Keltharian ships exploding, felt the weight of every life lost because of his orders. In his dreams, the antimatter detonations never stopped blooming, each one a small sun fueled by his decisions. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Come in. Lisa Grant entered, now wearing the insignia of a full commander. She'd been promoted after the battle, made second in command of Earth's growing defensive fleet. Morrison had recognized her talent for strategy and elevated her quickly. "You should be at the ceremony," she said gently. "They're dedicating the memorial to the crew we lost." Mitchell shook his head. "I can't face their families. Not yet. They don't blame you, Ryan. You saved Earth. I killed hundreds of Keltharians, maybe thousands. We still don't have final casualty counts." Grant sat down across from him. "They came here to conquer us, to destroy our colonies and force us into submission. Everything that happened was because they chose violence. That doesn't make it easier." "It's not supposed to be easy," Grant replied. "But you made the hard choice and humanity survived because of it." Mitchell changed the subject. "What's the status on the new ships?" "Construction is ahead of schedule. 6 more Valkyrie-class vessels will be operational within the year. Earth Defense Command is building an entire fleet based on your ship's design. More weapons of mass destruction," Mitchell said bitterly. "More deterrence," Grant corrected. "The Galactic Council is treating us very differently now. 3 species have sent ambassadors requesting formal alliances. Others are sending trade delegations. Nobody's threatening us anymore, because they're terrified of us." "Yes," Grant admitted. "But isn't that better than being conquered?" Before Mitchell could answer, his communicator chirped. Admiral Morrison's face appeared on the small screen. "Captain Commander, sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation. You're needed in the command center immediately." They arrived to find the center bustling with activity. Morrison stood at the central display studying a star chart marked with multiple contact points. "What's happening, sir?" Grant asked. "The Vraxian Collective just sent us a message," Morrison replied. "They're being invaded by the Kreth Dominion. Apparently, the Kreth saw what happened to the Keltharians and decided we were too dangerous to exist. They're planning to conquer several smaller species, build up their forces, then attack Earth." "And the Vraxians are warning us?" Mitchell asked. "They're asking for help," Morrison corrected. "The Vraxians were one of the species pushing for Earth to be quarantined after our battle. But now they're desperate, and they realize we're the only ones with the military capability to stop the Kreth." Mitchell studied the map. "How many ships are we talking about?" "Intelligence suggests the Kreth have at least 80 warships heading for Vraxian space. If they conquer the Collective, they'll have access to resources and industrial capacity that could make them unstoppable. So we have to intervene," Grant said quietly. "That's the question I'm putting to you both," Morrison replied. "The President is meeting with her advisors now, but she wants military perspective. Do we help the Vraxians, or do we let this play out and prepare for the Kreth to come after us eventually?" Mitchell was quiet for a long moment. 6 months ago, he'd unleashed humanity's fury to protect Earth. Now they were asking him to do it again, but for aliens who'd wanted to isolate humanity, who'd called them dangerous barbarians. "If we help them," Mitchell said slowly, "the galaxy will see us as either saviors or warmongers, depending on how it goes. If we don't help them, we prove every fear about human selfishness, right? And strategically," Morrison pressed. "Strategically, we can't let the Kreth build that kind of power base. Better to stop them now with allies than face them alone later." "I agree," Grant added, "but we need to be smart about this. We can't just charge in with overwhelming force like we did against the Keltharians. We need to show the galaxy that humans can be precise, controlled, surgical." Morrison nodded. "The President is leaning toward intervention. Captain Mitchell, the Valkyrie is the only ship ready for immediate deployment. Can you be ready in 48 hours? Mitchell thought about the nightmares, about the weight he already carried. Then he thought about more species suffering because humanity chose to hide behind its weapons instead of using them to protect others. "We'll be ready." Sir, 2 days later, the Valkyrie jumped to Vraxian space, accompanied by 3 Earth cruisers and 2 destroyers. It wasn't a large force, but it would have to be enough. The Vraxian homeworld appeared on their screens, a beautiful blue and green planet marred by orbital bombardment scars. The Kreth fleet hung in space around it, methodically destroying defensive satellites and military installations. "This is Captain Mitchell of the Earth defense ship Valkyrie, calling the Kreth fleet. You are ordered to cease your attack and withdraw immediately." The Kreth commander's response came quickly. "Earth vessel, you have no authority here. This is a conflict between the Kreth Dominion and the Vraxian Collective. Leave now, or be destroyed." "I'm giving you one chance to choose peace," Mitchell replied. "After that, we'll make you leave." Arrogant humans, the Kreth commander spat. You defeated the weak Keltharians and now think yourselves invincible. We've studied your tactics. We know your weapons. You will not surprise us. Mitchell glanced at Grant, who'd transferred to the Valkyrie to serve as his tactical officer. She shrugged. Their funeral. All right, Mitchell said. Let's do this differently than last time. Minimal casualties. Precision strikes only. Show them we can be surgical when we choose to be. The Kreth fleet moved to engage, their 80 ships forming an aggressive attack formation. But they'd prepared for the wrong battle. They'd studied the fight against the Keltharians, so they'd spaced their ships to avoid kinetic weapon splash damage and reinforce their shields against electromagnetic pulses. But Mitchell didn't repeat his previous tactics. Instead, the Valkyrie and her escorts used their superior maneuverability to dart around the Kreth formation, targeting specific systems with precision railgun fire. They hit engines, weapons arrays, shield generators. Each shot was calculated to disable, not destroy. The Kreth expected brutal human warfare. Instead, they got something that shocked them more: discipline and restraint. The human ships moved like a surgical strike team, crippling enemy vessels without killing their crews. Within an hour, half the Kreth fleet was disabled and drifting. The other half had withdrawn to regroup, confused by tactics that didn't match their intelligence reports. Kreth Commander, Mitchell broadcast. As you can see, we don't need to use weapons of mass destruction to defeat you. We can be precise. We can be controlled. But make no mistake, if you force us to escalate, we will. This is your last chance to withdraw peacefully. There was a long pause. Then the Kreth fleet began jumping to faster-than-light speeds, fleeing the system. They'd expected mindless human aggression and found instead something more frightening. Humans who could choose when and how to use their terrible capabilities. The Vraxian defense coordinator, a being named Zexla, contacted the Valkyrie with obvious relief. Captain Mitchell, on behalf of the collective, thank you. You saved countless lives today. We did what was necessary, Mitchell replied. But Coordinator, I need you to understand something. Humanity isn't your enemy. We never were. We're violent, yes. We're capable of terrible destruction, yes. But we're also capable of choosing not to use that destruction. We can be your allies if you let us. I think many in the collective will see things differently after today, Zexala said quietly. You could have destroyed the Kreth fleet, but you chose mercy. That says more about humanity than all our previous intelligence reports. After the battle, Mitchell stood on the observation deck, watching the Vraxian planet slowly rotate below. Grant joined him, 2 cups of coffee in her hands. She offered him one, and they stood in comfortable silence for a while. You did good today, she said finally. Showed the galaxy that we're not just mindless warmongers. We're still carrying enough firepower to destroy civilizations, Mitchell replied. That doesn't change. No, but how we choose to use it does. That's what matters. Mitchell thought about this. Maybe Grant was right. Maybe humanity's unique capacity for violence wasn't a curse but a responsibility. They could choose when to unleash it and when to hold back. That choice, that restraint, might be what separated them from true monsters. What happens now? He asked. Now we go home, Grant said. The Vraxians are talking about proposing Earth for Galactic Council membership. Other species are watching to see what we do next. We've proven we can fight. Now we have to prove we can build peace. Can we? After everything? I don't know, Grant admitted. But I think we have to try. 3 months later, Earth received formal recognition from the Galactic Council, not as junior members to be guided, but as full equals with